So today is a Saturday afternoon and we are right here in 127 Devonshire Road. And where is this place? This is actually our One Global office right in the heart of Singapore prime address. So today on my right, we have none other than Chris Frame from GetGround over here. And the reason why we have him here as our guest today is because we understand for the last few months, many of you have been asking us about how do you actually buy a UK property or homes using a company name. So we thought, who else better than to invite Chris Frame to share with us. So with that, I would like to ask, how are you, Chris?
Very well indeed, thanks Sean. Thank you for having me on this rainy afternoon.
Thank you. I know you have been quite busy because you've been going around, people have been asking about UK property, buying through a company names. Maybe today, take the opportunity to share with our clients over here why people has been buying UK property through a company names, what are the good, what are the not so good, maybe if there is. And with that, guys, let us pass the moment over to Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the warm welcome indeed. My name is Chris. I'm the VP of Growth for GetGround. We've got offices here in Singapore as well as in Hong Kong, and then our headquarters are in the UK in London. We're founded by two Singaporean brothers. They're actually in London, and then myself, a Brit, is in Singapore. And at GetGround, what we do, we specialise in setting up and then running UK limited companies for the sole purpose of buying investment property in the UK. So really the benefits of using a limited company tend to only exist if you're actually investing in property. So I wouldn't really recommend using a limited company structure or indeed our services if you were looking to purchase for your own use. But from an investment perspective, the use of a limited company has many, many advantages to it. And what GetGround are actually doing is making those advantages more accessible to all of the investors. And what we've actually done is designed a very quick, very simple solution. All can be done online, all done remotely. And we can set up a UK limited company for the individual. We would register that company with Companies House, which if you're in Singapore, that's the ACRA equivalent. We would then structure that limited company for the investor as per their own wishes. We would produce and verify all of the legal documentation for that limited company, and importantly, that allows that limited company to actually purchase and hold that investment property in the UK. And then very importantly, we'd also open a UK financial bank account for that limited company. And again, all of that can be done remotely, all done online, very, very quickly. So from a customer's perspective, it'd take 20 to 30 minutes or so. Thereacter, in terms of the ongoing management side of things, we will actually do all of the financial administration for that limited company. So we would do all of the accountancy side, the tax filing, the tax auditing, the bookkeeping services, company tax returns. We undertake the role of the company secretary.
That's a lot of things.
We also act as the registered office address. So we provide a very comprehensive one-stop solution, both on the setup, but then also on the ongoing administration and actual financial management. Designed to be very quick, designed to be very cost-effective as well. And I think really that's what GetGround ultimately are bringing to the marketplace. We're removing two of the biggest prohibitive factors that have previously existed when setting up a limited company. It's actually been a very popular route to try and undertake for many, many years. But previously it's been very, very expensive to set up a limited company and then very expensive to run a limited company each year. And then secondly, it's been very time consuming. I'm sure you all know about this as well, but to set up a limited company, particularly from an international client or a non-UK resident basis, can take weeks and months to set up a limited company, and then the time involvement that's needed to then run that company again is enormous. So really we're just removing those two factors from the marketplace to make these, as I say, these benefits more accessible. In terms of those benefits, the one that tends to get the most amount of attention is, of course, the tax efficiencies. Very simply, buy-to-let investment property is the same really as any other business. And limited companies were designed to make businesses more efficient. And so very much the same principles actually apply when using a limited company structure when purchasing an investment property. So there's a number of tax efficiencies. Investors like that because that increases profits, increases returns, it improves cash flows. But there are many other advantages as well. It creates a scenario where it offers greater protection. There is a reduced liability, reduced personal liability. The limited companies that we create are their own individual entities, and that entity actually owns the property, but also with it takes on all of the debt, all of the liabilities, particularly around the mortgage financing side of things. It's a mechanism that makes it very, very easy to buy and sell with multiple people.
Right.
We set up limited companies, all of them have 100 shares. And then those shares can be allocated and proportioned however the investors wish to do so. So really easy to structure. It can improve and help with estate and inheritance planning purposes. Important to note, these are not tax avoidance schemes, but it does help create greater flexibility around estate planning and help mitigate those taxes. And it's probably best to have individual conversations with each customer to sort of explain that in a bit more detail, because every situation will be unique. And then finally, and I think this is the other big thing that has changed in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, is that financing is now a lot easier to get in a limited company. It's become it's essentially no longer specialist lending, is what I would say. So there's a number of mortgage options. In 2019 alone, there were over 30,000 buy-to-let properties purchased in the UK that used a limited company and also that took out a mortgage. So the market is really increasing in its size, very fast growing, and so plenty of options available as well. And then in terms of the tax efficiencies, again, it might be easier to sort of talk to people individually, but there's a number of benefits that come, particularly during the ownership and then the exit side of things. One key thing to mention is that on entry, stamp duty remains exactly the same if you were purchasing in your personal name. So there's no financial gain or disadvantage on that side of things. Two key benefits, and again, I'm happy to go into a bit more detail as necessary, but the two key benefits during ownership are the ability still to, when using a limited company, to offset your mortgage interest against that income. Important to note that unfortunately now, since 2015, anyone that owns an asset in the UK that is generating an income will be liable for income tax. And in your own personal name, you can now no longer offset that mortgage. And given that tends to be the highest associated cost to this investment, having that ability to offset against that income can be very advantageous, a significant saving. And then more importantly, particularly for your international clients, the ability to then withdraw money out of that property and out of that limited company very efficiently exists, because as a non-UK resident, there is 0% income tax on dividend income. And again, because we will undertake the role of company secretary, we will help document and process all of that for individuals. So they're kind of the two key benefits during ownership. And then on exit, there are reduced capital gains taxes. And that's a big saving. And particularly with investors tending to hold property, we saw some research recently that tended to indicate investors holding property for 8 to 10 years on average. And that's a time frame where property prices can double in the UK historically. So, with that in mind, any capital gain saving can be quite a significant amount of money.
Right.
And then I guess finally a little bit just about our fees. So we have a one-time setup fee, which is £500 per limited company. That includes all of the setup processes that I mentioned, the opening, the creation of the company, the registration, the structuring, the legal documentation, and indeed the opening of the UK bank account. And then our running costs, the financial administration costs, are £20 per month. And again, that includes absolutely everything relating to all financial administration of that limited company, the accountancy, tax filing, auditing, the company secretarial services, and the company registered office address as well. And very importantly, there are no additional bank charges either.
Okay. Good to know.
And that is, well, a brief overview of GetGround, but I've probably rambled for too long.
Yep. So of course, other than the sharing session that we have now, I'm going to represent many of our audience over here. So we have a few questions, not a lot. We probably have about 100 questions for you, Chris. So of course, now.
How long have we all got?
So of course, we have over here, I have a couple of questions which are the usually commonly asked questions by many of our buyers who are planning to buy UK homes or who have already bought UK homes. So just bear with us, there are a few questions that I think you'll be the best person to answer. Maybe question one. If I am someone who already own a UK property under my name, is it worth transferring to a company right now?
So my personal view is that it is possible to do, and it's actually a very easy process. If you already own the property, and importantly, you've completed on the property, there will be additional costs, which more often than not make it very difficult to justify transferring from personal ownership into a limited company post-completion. And the reason for that is that the UK government would actually view that as a sale from you as an individual to the limited company.
Okay.
And therefore stamp duty, land tax would definitely be applicable again, and potentially capital gains tax subject to when you bought that property and the performance of the market. So it is possible, but those additional costs often make it difficult to justify post-completion. What I would say, though, is anything pre-completion absolutely is possible. So the most simple way is to find a property, set up the company, exchange contracts, and then proceed to completion. But if you have exchange contracts but not yet completed, then it is very, very simple to switch that into a limited company structure.
Okay.
So my sort of view would be that anything pre-completion definitely is beneficial.
Okay.
Post-completion, it can be. We have had customers that have done it because they see the long-term value in it, but it's probably a case-by-case basis onto whether those additional costs are then justifiable for that particular customer.
Right. So guys, now you hear from Chris himself. For those of you who have purchased your London property or UK property but have not completed on it yet, because the fact that most of the marketing that has been done in Singapore are off plans. So in between, before completion, please get in touch with Chris so that he can advise you on what is the best solution going forward in acquiring the property under the company name. So second questions, how easy is it for us foreigners who is based outside UK to set up this company, and how long does it take typically in terms of the whole journey?
So very, very easy is the simple answer. The important thing to note, in the UK, for limited companies and the companies that we set up for purchasing property, there is no need for any UK ownership or shareholding or anything else like that. So a limited company that we set up can be 100% owned by the customer or the customers, depending on how many shareholders they are, regardless of their nationality, regardless of their residency status. In terms of the process, it can all be done online or done via our website, www.getground.co.uk, and then clicking the Get Started button. And from a customer, it would take 20 to 30 minutes. There's a three-stage process. Firstly, just a registration, which is an email, a password, and a second-stage verification. So typically an SMS text message code. Thereafter, there is then the account creation or a profile creation, and that just asks an individual for their own personal details, name, date of birth, address, and then part of that is we ask for a proof of ID and a proof of address, so commonly a passport and a proof of address dated within the last 3 months, so common AML documentation.
Right.
That can be uploaded to our platform. It doesn't need to be certified, but just needs to be uploaded to the platform. And then finally, we have a selfie part of that as well. So very much using today's technology. And that technology makes sure that the person taking the selfie is the same person whose ID has been uploaded.
Sure.
So that side of things only ever needs to be done once. And that creates an individual with an account or a profile on GetGround. And then the setting up of a company would be very quickly. That is just filling in the property details that you're acquiring. So the address, the price, an anticipated completion date. We do ask for the solicitor's details, and the reason for that is that once we then set up the limited company, we will share all of the relevant information with them automatically that will then enable them to either exchange contracts and or complete, depending on where an individual's up to in the time frame. And so in terms of timescales, customer-wise, that would all take, the whole process would be 20 to 30 minutes. If I erred slightly on the side of caution, that limited company would be operational, web-filed, i.e. an existing limited company, within 24 hours.
Okay.
More often than not, it actually happens quicker than that, but if I erred slightly on the side of caution, 24 hours. And then the bank account would be open 48 hours thereafter. So really very, very quick.
Give and take, I think about three days.
From start to finish, you would have an operational limited company with a financial payment account in
So
3
guys,
days.
Chris has mentioned, within 3 days, you have all the documents ready and you have all the files that's required. Within 3 days, you should have your company up and running.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, next questions. Under this company structure, what is the maximum number of names that we can have under this company structure?
So from our side of things, we create very simple limited company structures or SPVs. Ideally, we want to keep a maximum of 8 shareholders within a limited company. We can go to 10. The challenge thereafter is actually you run the risk of becoming what's called an alternative investment fund, and I won't bore you with the details of that. Right. But then the structuring and the tax efficiencies actually change. So ideally sort of 8 to 10 is sort of the maximum. Right. But again, very easy to structure, very easy to allocate a proportion of ownership. Right. And obviously in a personal name, the maximum you can ever have is 4 on a title deed. So it can, for large groups, help. Right.
Because typically, as you probably is aware of, that many of our buyers who come in are usually our parents, and they were always asking, John, if I buy this under a company structure, can I put my children's name in it? And many of them are actually maybe below 21, below 18 years old. is that possible to still include their name?
So any shareholder must be a minimum age of 18, and that's a UK-wide law, unfortunately. So it's not something we can change.
Right.
But they must be a minimum of 18, and then in GetGround and the limited companies we have, they must own a minimum of 1 share. So 18 and above really is the common one. The good news, though, and this is again one of the reasons why limited companies are quite popular, particularly from estate planning perspectives, which is what we touched upon earlier. It is very, very easy to transfer or gift shares proportionally or progressively during the ownership. So you might buy a property today, and if you did have a child that was under the age of 18, when they do turn 18, you could then start gifting them shares. And it just helps with some of the estate planning perspectives and purposes. So it becomes very easy to add shareholders without incurring any additional stamp duties or anything like that, rather than in your own personal name, where essentially if you wanted to change the structure of that and add a child, essentially you end up having to sell it and then rebuy it is sort of the simple way of doing it. So it is a benefit in that regard.
Right. The other questions I think many of our audience would like to know is that you probably had touched on earlier, but just to reiterate, is that after setting up this company, many of the clients are sometimes worried about, John, now that I have this company set up, buying this under a company name, how easy is it for me to actually secure a loan? Will the bank in UK still continue to lend us, and how do they access us? Do they access us as a company or access us individually as a shareholder?
It's a great question. It's probably the most common asked question I get asked as well. Simply financing is very readily available. I mentioned earlier that there was sort of over 30,000 companies that bought property and that took out financing last year alone. So in terms of getting financing, it's relatively simple. In terms of different lenders, like in your own personal name, actually, each one has their own different criteria, own different circumstances, and essentially the same thing exists. Probably the most common approach, though, is the underwriting process remains exactly the same. So the lender will just underwrite the shareholders. So they would look at proof of ID, proof of address, and probably income of the individual shareholders. And then all that changes is the name on the mortgage deed and indeed the title deed of the property. Instead of the name of the individuals would be the name of the limited company.
Okay.
There are some other lenders that do operate slightly differently, where essentially they don't profile the shareholders. They just look at the company and they very much work on a rental valuation approach, and that's essentially it. So there are different scenarios for different lenders. It tends to be those lenders that have a slightly more risk-adverse approach, we say, and they ask for a bit more information, they tend to be the ones that offer the most competitive rates. So it may be a case, again, talking to individuals and working out what's the best solution for them. We partner with a couple of independent mortgage brokers who have helped with many of our clients, and again, they would be best placed to essentially establish which solution is best for that client. But getting finance, typically up to 75% loan to value as is a maximum, is very readily available.
Yeah, so it's still 75% loan to value available buying through a company structure. The other question is, to buy a property under a company, does this in any way help to reduce inheritance tax buy to let properties? I get this a lot, but sometimes I'm probably not in the best position to answer that question. It's one of those scenarios where each individual situation probably needs a little bit more detail. But yes, essentially a limited company can help create greater flexibility. I mentioned earlier, they're not tax avoidance, and unfortunately trying to avoid paying tax is illegal, but there is ways to manage it and make it more efficient. And a limited company certainly helps with that. We touched upon it actually earlier on with the shareholding side of things, in terms of it's very easy to start transferring shares over. And one of the benefits of that is that you can start passing over some of the benefit or some of the shares of that particular company without giving up financial control of that asset and indeed some of the benefit of that asset. So you can slowly, progressively do it without giving up the control. Because I think what we've found is, particularly if you, in the case of parents and grandparents wanting to transfer over to a child, they don't always want to give them a 500,000, £1 million asset when they're 21 years old, because they don't trust them, very simply. And the nice thing is that owning it in a limited company means they could actually give away 99 shares, but then retain 1 share themselves, for example, and they would still then have an element of control over that asset, because importantly, when you set up in a limited company, nothing can actually be done unless you've got all shareholders' permission. So it just creates a bit more flexibility there. And what that enables is the transfer to exist earlier on in a lifetime, and therefore create greater flexibility in the
potential to mitigate any potential costs.
I see. And in terms of tax and stamp duty payable, you mentioned earlier it's the same as you're buying through a individual?
It is, providing the purpose of property, the purpose of the purchase is for investment reasons, then the stamp duty remains exactly the same as it would be in your own personal name. There is a common misconception that limited companies sometimes have a higher stamp duty threshold.
Yeah, because that is the case for Singapore.
Yes.
I mean, as a Singaporean, if anybody that is buying a Singapore property through a company structure, you actually pay a much higher stamp duty.
You do. And you also do in the UK, actually, if you use a limited company to purchase the property for your own name, in your own use.
Okay.
So if you're going to live in it and use a limited company, you would also pay a higher stamp duty tax as well. So I think that's probably the common misconceptions. It's sort of the Singapore scenario and the fact that there can be an increase in stamp duty for using a limited company.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier that our benefits and our services really only apply if you are an investor. So really anyone using GetGround, they will pay the same stamp duty as they would have done in their own personal name.
Yeah, I think especially in this part of the world, in Asia, most of our buyers, I always say 90% will still be investors. You have that 10% probably buying because they have kids studying there or they are migrating there for own use. But I would say a good 80 to 90% are still mainly investors, which will...
Yeah, we see very much the same sort of thing as well.
Okay, and the last few questions. So today, I buy this UK property through a company, right? And a few years later, I decided to exit this investment. Do I sell the property or do I actually sell the company?
You've actually got two options when you come to sell. So you can either sell the shares of the company and therefore with it the property because the company owns the property. So you can either sell the shares of that limited company or you can sell the property out of the limited company. So actually both options exist and essentially the same process happens, but there are a couple of variances to that. Firstly, selling the shares of a limited company creates a lower capital gains tax than you would in your personal name. So in your own personal name, capital gains tax is either 18% or 28%. In a limited company, if you sell the shares, you will have a capital gains tax of either 10 or 20%, so an 8% saving regardless of your tax bracket. So that's a positive. The other positive side with that as well is that the incoming buyer doesn't actually need to pay stamp duty. So that helps the seller actually potentially sell for a higher price because it creates the opportunity for a bit more negotiation to increase the price and increase the gain that is being realised. In the situation where you sell the property out of the company, so if I was the incoming buyer and I was going to live in it, for example, and therefore no benefit to the company, then I can just buy the property out of the company. I would pay stamp duty, so that would exist. Importantly for the seller, they then wouldn't pay any capital gains tax. They would actually pay corporation tax, which is a flat rate 19%. For those that are then non-UK residents, the money would be extracted out of that limited company via dividend income, which I mentioned on earlier, doesn't imply or doesn't incur any income tax. So really efficient way of doing it. And once that had happened, GetGround would then dissolve that company. So we would just shut down that company. So you've got both options. And what GetGround are trying to bring to the marketplace is a lot more trust and transparency to it and also to the use of a limited company structure. So hopefully very easy to sell as well.
Yeah, I guess the best way is still really to have that individual conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But both are available.
And I'm not too sure, someone is asking, is there any difference to buying the property under a Singapore company versus a UK company?
So GetGround, we only create UK registered limited companies. My view now is that the use of an offshore structure is a lot more complex now, and I don't think it's necessarily viewed as favourably as maybe it was 5-10 years ago. It also adds an extra layer of complexity. So it tends to be a lot more expensive, first and foremost, to set up that company. It also tends to be less efficient because one of the reasons the tax efficiencies exist with a UK limited company is that you've got the asset and indeed the registered company all under the same jurisdiction and therefore all under the same regulatory bodies and all under the same governance. So very, very simple to imply. My view is that offshore entities, you can do it. They tend to be more expensive to set up. It can be more difficult to get financing, not always, but it can be. So it adds an extra layer of complexity, and my view is I don't think you then get any benefit from that additional cost and complexity.
Okay. I guess we come to the last question, and this last question, of course, belongs to me. And the last question will be, of course, if I would come to you because it's all about having a discussion first, right? So if I were to come to you for a discussion because I have so many grand plans about how should I go around to acquiring my next UK property, is there a fee that I have to pay you for your time?
No, nothing until you decide to go ahead. No. My time to chat, to any advice, any questions is entirely free of charge.
Perfect. And because I believe you'll be such a sought-after man because of what you do, when is your next available date, Chris?
I'm available whenever anyone needs me. We have a team in Singapore, a team in Hong Kong, a team in the UK, so we can cover all time zones. So if I'm not available, someone else will definitely be available whenever any customer wishes to have a conversation.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So we have Chris over here. Chris is based in Singapore. So please take the opportunity to get hold of him so that you can have that discussion with him. End of the day, it's not about whether you should or you should not buy your next UK home through a UK company, but more importantly, is for you to know what options do you have as a UK property investors. So with that, thank you so much, Chris, for your time.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting.
Yeah, and for those who have been with us for the last 30, 40 minutes, and for those of you who have been quite observant, you probably have been noticing this lighted development behind me. And this is none other than Newham's Yard. This project, this development that we are showcasing this weekend, Saturday and tomorrow, Sunday. So maybe just for me to stand up, quickly, just to show you, this project is actually in Central London, Zone 1. It's actually by Galliard Homes, one of the private largest residential developer in the capital. And for this project, this is sitting right in the heart of Central London, Zone 1. This is along Tower Bridge Road. We have Tower 1 and Tower 2. This is the North Tower and this is the South Tower. On the North Tower, we have about 29 units. This is launched in December last year, almost fully sold for the 29 units. We have about 6 units left of the 2 beds. Right now, this weekend, we are actually launching the South Tower. This is a brand new tower as well. We have about 57 units, but right now we are releasing the last 17 beautiful units over here, a mix of 1 and 2 beds as well. What makes Newham's Yard so interesting is that, firstly, this is a 999 years leasehold development. It's almost like a freehold. It's 999. I know in Singapore, in Asia, many of us actually appreciate when a property is freehold. This is 999 years. And in terms of location, for those who is not familiar, this is actually just a 10 minutes walk to the London Bridge Station. This is London Bridge Station. Basically, is the one of the most commonly used train station, if I call it. You have the Jubilee Line, the Northern Line, and the Main Line that brings you to the rest of Central London, all within 10 minutes. You'll reach Bond Street within 7 minutes. You'll reach King's Cross under 10 minutes as well. So very, very well connected. And this is actually the Tower Bridge Road. So if you just came along this main road and you take about 10 minutes walk, you'll reach about the train station in about 10 minutes. And the good thing about this development is that this is completing end of this year, and the new tower is completing quarter two next year. And the good thing about, for those who are looking at, you probably have heard of this, what we call a stamp duty holiday, which will end at 31st of March next year. There's this stamp duty holiday for those who want to take advantage of the stamp duty holiday, which is a savings of up to 15,000 in terms of stamp duty savings. You can actually look at the 2 bedders over here in the North Tower, because these will complete later this year, which will be in time for the stamp duty cut-off period. And right now, over the next 2 days, we'll be here in the Devonshire office. We'll be showcasing the developments. Come and ask us with regards to any questions that you might have in terms of the price list, in terms of the fact sheet, floor plans, brochure. For those who knows of someone who is the brokers in One Global, get in touch with them, ask them for the brochure and the fact sheet and the information to be sent across to you. But really, really what makes this so interesting, this is prime Central London, Zone 1, 999 years, brand new, with 2 years warranty. This is actually by one of the best developer in London itself. So I always understand, for us buying a property overseas, we are always worried about the profile of the developer, whether do we put in a 10%, 10-20% deposit today, will this be completed? I'm very happy and very confident to say that we are working with a very strong developer with very good, strong track record. So there's really no concern of that. We have done all the due diligence. And more importantly, buying UK, we don't have this, what we call the ABSD, Additional Buyer Stamp Duty. So if this is an investment for you and you have an intention to buy an investment property, why not explore buying a London property? Because you don't pay ABSD, there's no TDSR. Loan to value, you can still take a loan from whether is it a Singapore bank up to 70% or even a UK banks up to 75%. And the good thing about this is that, in buying a property in London is all what we call deferred staggered payment. It's not progressive. And right now, in fact, for this property, the payment term is actually 10% upfront. You then pay a 5% and then 85% during completion. But yesterday, after discussing with the developer, we managed to get this agreed that if you decide to buy a property today, upfront, you just put a £2,000 deposit through your credit card. You pay your first 10% in 3 weeks' time, and the remaining 90% is only upon completion. So it's a 10% and 90% upon completion, along with the stamp duty. So this is a fantastic development that we'll be showcasing here over the next 2 days. I really strongly urge all of you to come by, get in touch with us, make an appointment to come down to see this development. You can't just walk in because right now we are in the midst of this COVID-19, so safe distancing need to be monitored, so we only by appointment basis. But really just to come down, let us have the opportunity to share with you, firstly, why you should consider buying a UK property as an investment, and second, why this project, New Homes Yard by Garliard Homes, is probably a worthwhile consideration for you who is looking to buy a London property as well. With that, thank you very much for spending the time with us. I hope you enjoy your good weekend. Have your lunch. For those who have not had your lunch, please go for your lunch and keep in touch, and I see you really, really soon. Thank you, everyone.